Welcome back to our second week of forming our missional community covenants. Last week we looked at family and just what does that mean to be a family of God, and what are some tangible commitments that we can make throughout 2023 to do together. And I heard great things about how last Wednesday went, so I just am hopeful and praying for your discussion tonight. So that's what we're going to do. Take the next hour to go over the second identity, and that is of missionary. And we are a family of missionary disciples. And so next week, you're going to be focusing on discipleship. But this week, just as we talked about on Sunday, we are talking about the identity of being a missionary. And so for the next hour, that's what we're going to do, is talk about how can we be missionaries? How can we live like Jesus did, and to share the gospel and to show the gospel to those around us this year. And just like last week, hopefully you take a bunch of notes and then spend the last 15 minutes kind of boiling it down into some key commitments. But I also want to encourage you to take some time throughout the week afterwards to edit it down, and just to make sure that it's written in a concise way that you guys can commit to. Because on the fourth week, after we've gone through all of the identities, on the fourth week, we're going to come together as a missional community and have a dinner, have a meal together. We're going to celebrate, and we're going to sign the covenant together and say, hey, this is what we're committing to one another and to committing to God under Him. And so we're excited for that. But today is missionary, and so just like we did last week, just make the discussion a little bit helpful, a little bit easier to go through. We're going to break it down into 3 sections, and so before I do that, I want to read for us the commitment that we are generally making together, all as a church, before we get into specifics about how we're going to do that as a missional community. So I want to read it for us, and then I just want to remind us of 2 things that will be helpful, I think, in the discussion to think through them before we jump into those 3 questions. So it says, as missionaries, we commit to serve, love, and share the gospel as a team with a specific group of individuals whom God has placed around us. So just the 2 kind of things I want us to go over before we can jump into those 3 questions about how we'll live this out. Again, to love, serve, and share the gospel with a specific group of people as a team. First, just want to say, we're doing this as a team. Jesus sends us out together as a community. That's why we are a missional community. We're a community on mission. And so when you think through these commitments together, try to think through it as a group, as a team. How are you guys going to do it together? That's number 1. Number 2, I think it's a helpful thing to think through, is to think through this in seasons. As a church, we know that as, especially living here in Canada, the seasons are different. You can do different things at different times, whether it's events or even sports activities or just weather-related things. There's just seasons. And so trying to think through it in that way. As a church, we always say springtime is a great time to start getting those relationships going again. We do our evangelism training in the spring as a church. And then summertime is kind of the peak for making new relationships, establishing new relationships. The fall is trying to get back into a routine. And so how do we take those relationships we've created and form them into a routine? And then winter, you just hold on to anything you've got, any of the relationships you've got, because it's really difficult to create new relationships in the wintertime. And so many times that's training, preparing, reviewing, and planning for the year. And so that's kind of our rhythm that we have as a church. But so when you think through this as a mission community, think through it the same way. How can you as a team, and how can you think through this in seasons? That will be very helpful for us. Okay, so here's the 3 questions that help you think through this. The first one is who? Who is it that God has called you to reach? Which people? Is it people based on the location where they live? Is it people who live in a certain apartment building, a condo building? Is it people who live in a certain neighborhood? Maybe it's a certain ethnic group, or maybe it's a certain religious group. Maybe you're committed to reach to a certain group of people. Maybe you're going to commit to reach to anybody who goes to this school, or anybody who's involved in this program, or anybody who goes to this community center. Try to think through that. Who is it that God has called you to reach? And I will say this, if we talk about a calling, then the calling comes from God. And so we need to spend some time praying about this. Now, maybe some of our mission communities already have a specific group of people that you feel called to reach. That's great. For most of us, probably not. And so I just want to encourage you, maybe your commitment won't necessarily be, hey, we're committed to reach this group of people today, but you can still write down, we'll figure out who it is that God has called us to reach by the end of February, the end of March. And these, that way, it's still something you commit to and can make a commitment, promise to keep, that you will still figure out who it is that you're called to reach. But unless we figure out the who, it's going to be very difficult to figure out how we're going to reach them. And so what are you guys going to do? Maybe go on some prayer walks. Maybe you'll write down a list of the people you're already reaching out to. Because I know many of our mission communities, we've already been reaching out to people. We've already been inviting people in. And so who? Figure out your who. And if you don't know your who or not super confident about it, well, then make a plan to come up with figuring that out over the next few months of the year. So once you figure out the who, then we got to figure out the how. That's where the next two questions go. The second question is, how will you connect with them? How will you connect with them? So I said on Sunday, you got to find places to go to. Where are places, if you know the who, well, where do they go? Where are good places to connect with them? And then as a missional community, you guys can decide, hey, well, let's go to this. If you're trying to reach a group of people at a condo building or an apartment building, say, well, what are some events that happen there? What are some activities that those people go to? Could we even put on an event? Could we put on an activity? Or can we just go to something? Could we volunteer at something? What can we do together to reach those people? How can we connect with them to know their names and then get to know their stories? And then another very key part of missional communities is inviting people in, right? We're going out to meet people, but we also need to be inviting them in and show hospitality towards them. Our church is very big on hospitality. And so maybe on your Wednesday family dinner nights, if you're meeting on Wednesday night, well, maybe you can commit to say, hey, every second week, we're going to invite in people, or or we're going to go on a trip together. Maybe some of the trips you guys planned last week as a family, hey, maybe we're going to designate this one where we can invite in some of those people that we're reaching. What are some things that you can invite people into? Again, I know something that's been a very huge staple in our missional communities is having a family dinner night where we're inviting in friends to eat with us too. A great opportunity to show the gospel and also have conversations where you're sharing the gospel in a very natural way. So how are you going to connect with them? By going out and inviting them in as well. And then lastly is, how are you going to share the gospel? How are you going to talk about Jesus? If we don't talk about Jesus, we're not actually doing evangelism. We're not actually living on the mission. The whole point of the mission is to point people to Jesus. And so, yeah, we want to love them and show them with our actions and our words, but we also want to be telling them, talking to them about Jesus. And not in a way that is unnatural, but a way that is fluent, that is just very normal, very conversational, very much true, authentic to the real relationship with Jesus. And so how are you guys going to do that? How are you guys going to be accountable to each other to make sure you do that? Maybe you can make a commitment to say everyone in the group will commit to share the gospel once a month. Can you make that commitment? Can you say, hey, we're going to keep a list of people and that our group's going to have access to. We're going to just keep a list of people and we're going to commit to praying for those people on a weekly basis. What are some action steps? Some things, again, that you can put in your calendar, put on your to-do list, put into tangible actions to actually live this out. So how will you share the gospel with them? Again, identify your who, identify your how are you going to connect with them, and then lastly, how are you going to share the gospel with them as well? I'm excited for your discussion now, and enjoy, and I'm excited to see what God will do through you guys and through us as we live out this identity of missionaries throughout the rest of this year. Jesus is ready to save souls. He's already doing it. He's already at work, and we just are joining him in what he's already doing. And so work with God to make a plan for how you'll live that out this year.